to the A block. And the latest development coming from China, where Huawei has been grappling with sanctions from Washington that threaten to cut its access to U.S. technology. But instead, when all is said and done, it appears that the Trump sanctions could end up hurting U.S. corporations, maybe even more than Chinese corporations. Joining us now is News with Rick Sanchez correspondent Michelle Greenstein. If there's a part of this story that would seem impressive to me, and I think to most people who follow business news, if nothing else, is Huawei's remarkable ability with so much speed, 2 months, to be able to already put out new phones and apparently upgrade the operating system that they've had for years.
It's definitely impressive, but we should be clear about one thing, which is that Huawei didn't start developing this operating system in response to Google banning it from using any Android support, the Play Store, or any other of the Google apps. It's actually been working on this since at least 2012. That's when it decided that a new operating system should be built, although it was top secret at the time, to the point where the employees working on it weren't even allowed to use their own personal phones while doing so. But Huawei has been hiring engineers specifically just to create a new operating system since at least 2016. We know this from job listings online, so technically public information. They've been trying to have 5G, augmented reality, and autonomous self-driving vehicles all together into one system that, of course, you know, if it were to be successful, would make it a really big player in the global technological stage. But today, yes, the 5G phone was released by Huawei. It's their first ever 5G phone. It cost about $900, and they're also saying that they're going to unveil these TV-like smart screen devices, and those are going to be the first products to have to be running on their own proprietary operating system that they've been developing. It's going to be called Hongmeng, like you said. It's going to be called Oak OS elsewhere out of China. And yes, we've had this question of whether or not Huawei will be able to compete, you know, now that it's no longer able to use Android, but we should just be clear that Huawei has been planning to do so for years now, and it's not just because of the Trump administration's latest ban.
But still, you have to ask yourself the question, if you know that your competitor is very talented, and in this case also very fast,
right,
why would you do something that's going to egg him on to want to beat you? In other words, why incentivize him to work faster and harder, which is apparently what they have done.
Right. I mean, on the national scale, there are political points to be made. I mean, we had Trump running a campaign of, you know, beating China, of making China come to the table, of forcing China to do things differently. But now it's to the point where Huawei's new operating system could be everywhere. We have Xiaomi, Vivo, and Oppo. All three smartphone makers are reportedly testing Hongmeng, this new Huawei operating system, on their devices. And this is, of course, something that Google would prefer to not have, right? Google doesn't want Huawei to have its own operating system or app store, because right now Google has almost a complete monopoly, right? Pretty much every single phone runs on the Android system. But this war on Huawei, this war on this, you know, one Chinese technological giant, is really symptomatic of the bigger war on China's technological dominance, which has been increasing. So, of course, we've been hearing a lot about security concerns, but really what this may be about is economic concerns, because we haven't seen any evidence yet that Huawei's spying, right, as an agent of the Chinese state. And Huawei even pitched a no-spy deal to the U.S. government. But let's talk about how well Huawei's been doing.
By the way, what you just said is really important, because at least according to the research that I have looked at, suggests that Huawei has been willing, as you said, to sign an actual, almost like a treaty, with not just the government of the United States, but with the government of the UK, for example, saying, look, if you catch us in any way spying, you know, we will agree to these, But what's interesting is, after they agreed to sign that document, they took the same document to Google and several other and they said, no, we're not willing to, Google was not willing to sign the same document.
And that's weird. That's highly significant, and it shows that it's not really about national security, that it's about these economic concerns. What we have is a story of a company that's doing extremely well. In 2018, just last year, their revenues were over $100 billion. Right now, they have 29% of the global telecom market, and they're poised to take over half of the 5G network, which is going to be the next generation of wireless technology.
And that's what it's really all about.
Exactly, but here's what's really important. If Huawei does end up dominating the next generation of wireless infrastructure, which it looks like it will be, the authority to set the standards for future networks is going to shift to China. So when you think of all the potential that's of surveillance potential that a network like 5G has, it makes sense why the United States would prefer that this authority didn't shift to China.
And by the way, surveillance is surveillance, whether the United States is doing it or China is doing it or Russia is doing it.
And it's not even speculation.
He who has the tool will use the tool.
Absolutely. And we want the tools. We have people like James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence. We have people like David Petraeus, the former CIA director. Both of these men have actually spoken about how these technologies, 5G, the smart grid, you know, all of these automated systems are going to be very useful at collecting information on people. And this is why it makes sense that literally the Western Surveillance Alliance, the Five Eyes Alliance, got together, all these spy chiefs got together last year in July of 2018 and literally coordinated on the banning of Huawei.
Wow. By the way, 30 seconds, but it seems to me in the end that the United States may have been damaging its own corporations with the pressure that they've put on Huawei. You agree?
I mean, I would agree. 5G is where the tech sector is going. Huawei is on the rise, so of course U.S. corporations would prefer if that weren't the case. However, big picture speaking, people that don't think in terms of national interest, people that think in terms of power and control, they don't care about U.S. versus China. That's a two-dimensional thing for them. For them, it's all about wherever they can get power and control, and China is not, any different.
Good.